Imposter syndrome is a thing. It is a pernicious psychological phenomenon. When you have imposter syndrome, you feel inadequate, like a fraud, undeserving of your position, like you don't belong in a job or a role that you really are already in. Imposter syndrome manifests itself in incessant worry that you'll be found out, that someone will suddenly realize that you are not as intelligent, qualified, or even as cool as they think you are. This project is not about researching imposter syndrome or even about telling you how to cure your own imposter syndrome. This project is real life testimonials. People from all over the world with different backgrounds and occupations, all who've experienced this same phenomenon. This project is not about solving the problem of imposter syndrome. It's about bringing to you an awareness that you're not alone. It's about showing all of us that there is hope to cope. Heidi Kirby has been a learning and development professional for over 13 years. She got her start as a college English professor, and since then, she's worked for a large healthcare company, a small tech startup, and even an instructional designer for NASA. You know, the guys that go to the moon. NASA. She is a founding member of Teaching a Path to L&D, where she mentors educators, typically K through 12 or higher education, who are looking to transition careers into learning and development. She's an active PhD candidate in instructional design and technology, and she hosts a podcast. It's called the BLOC, or Building Learning and Organizational Culture Podcast, where she interviews guests about how to bring learning to the forefront of the organization. And I am so happy that Heidi raised her hand to be part of this project. Hi, Heidi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you today?
Good.
Good. Heidi, tell us about you.
Oh boy. So like you said, I'm Heidi Kirby. Professionally, I started my career as a college English teacher. And so I got an undergrad and a graduate degree in English and started teaching part-time at like 3 or 4 different schools in my area. And at that point, I went back to school for an education graduate degree because I was trying to become a full-time professor. But if any of you have ever worked in higher education, you know that being full-time, being tenure track especially, is super difficult, especially if you have to stay within your region and you don't have a PhD. So I kind of pretty quickly gave up on that idea and decided to pursue something I had learned about in my education graduate program called instructional design. And I started a PhD program in instructional design like a crazy person when my son was 6 months old. And it started as kind of a personal goal. And a couple semesters in, I was like, wait, I was already doing all this when I was teaching college. So I took some time to kind of cater my resume and my portfolio more towards corporate instructional design and started networking with different people. And I was able to land my first instructional design job with NASA, of all things. So that was really awesome. Yeah. So I kind of went from organization to organization, and pretty quickly realized that I'm not an artist. And I preferred kind of the project management side. So the personal PhD goal quickly became like no, I think I'm going to use this to become a leader in the field. And that's really kind of what I want to do. Unfortunately, exactly a year ago in April, I was laid off due to COVID. Do you want me to keep going? Okay. I was laid off a year ago due to COVID, and it was pretty blindsiding for everybody. You just got a call in the afternoon saying that your position had been eliminated. So it was pretty
terrible,
pretty crazy. And so I was able to find a contract position pretty quickly for a startup in my area. And they were building a mobile LMS. And so I kind of got to see that on the back end and kind of got to lead their instructional design function. I got to start a podcast as part of that. So now I get to host an L&D podcast. And then I kind of leverage that as a springboard for the current job that I have now that I just started in January. And I actually am managing a small learning and development team. So, and PhD program wise, I'm hopefully this time next year going to be defending my dissertation if all goes according to plan.
Wow. So what's your dissertation on? Just curious.
Sure. So it is a qualitative study, and I'm looking at the leadership competencies that instructional designers need to do their everyday job. Because I think that there's an opportunity for these different graduate degree programs to really focus on those and hone those, because there are a lot of skills necessary to, especially if you're the only instructional designer or if your team is pretty small. There's a lot of project management, leadership,
Mhm.
communication pieces that go into that.
That's a very applicable dissertation to your life and many others. Um, so that's pretty cool. So, all right, so you've told us about some of your biggest accomplishments. What would others say about you as far as your accomplishments? What would they say are things that you have accomplished that they're impressed by?
Hmm. I think that I kind of have like the rap in my group of friends of like being the very type A. Like if somebody's going to own their own business, it's going to be Heidi.
Mhm.
But like on the other hand, what's really nice is I kind of have like the um I don't know if you've ever played Jackbox. It's like totally
I have not played it, but I've heard of it.
there's this game called Role Models, and it really lets you know what your friends think about you because it's kind of like this fun little superlative thing. And I always get the ones that are like, um, owning your own business, like being success or die. But then on the other hand, I always get the ones that are like really philanthropical, like most likely to start their own volunteer organization. So I kind of I feel like that's what people would say. And I kind of like that even though I'm really type A, people still are like, but she has a good heart, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I'll have to play that. That sounds like a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun. It has gotten us through COVID.
Well, that's good. All right, so what has been your experience with imposter syndrome?
So I was thinking about this since you kind of put out the bat signal to do these. Um and it's really interesting to think about it and then to kind of see I have a 4-year-old son,
Mm.
and he is just so confident, right? Like if you have kids or if you've met a kid, like we met one of our new neighbors, and he was like, "Oh, who's this?" And we're like, "Oh yeah, this is Henry." And he's like, "I like a lot of things and I'm very smart." And I'm like, "Okay, awesome." Right? Like, and that's just like his level of confidence. So when I'm trying to think back, I'm like, where does this start? And I feel like the obvious place where I don't have like a particular memory of it is like middle school, right? Because like middle
Mm.
school sucks for everyone, I feel like,
Mhm.
across the board. But the first time I really like remember like the feeling of dread of like true imposter syndrome was a senior in high school AP Calc class.
Mm.
And we had a test and I bombed it. I got an F. And so I'm sitting there with this paper on my desk, and I'm like kind of doing the side eye around to see like if anybody saw it, first of all, the big giant F on my paper.
Mhm.
And like my school was pretty small. These are people that I'd been in class with for 10 years. We'd kind of moved up through all the grades together.
Yeah.
And I should have been more kind of confident that it wouldn't have mattered if I failed, right? But I just remember feeling that like deep sense of dread, like my mom and dad are going to kill me, like I'm going to fail out of high school, I'm not going to graduate. And then come to find out, starting to look around, everybody else has the same exact look on their face. And as it turns out, we all failed and we were being graded on a curve and the tests were really hard on purpose. And the teacher kind of played us in that sense.
Ugh, that was rude.
Yeah. But that's kind of like, that's my first real memory that I kind of tried to dig out of there, of the imposter syndrome.
Yeah. So, do you still struggle with that? Do you still struggle with imposter syndrome?
All the time.
Okay.
So being laid off, that was a huge one, right?
Yeah.
Um, you know, I had just been promoted in December actually. And so, having 4 months later to have the tables completely turned and to have like the bottom dropped out from under me was just, and it coming out of nowhere.
Mhm.
I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to find a new job? Do I have what it takes to find a new job? We're in the middle of a pandemic. What am I going to do? How am I going to make money? How am I going to, help my family?
Mhm.
And, because my husband and I are pretty much a 50-50 split. Like we both work and we both, and, I remember when I found out the news, I like came out of the bedroom that I was in and I was like apologizing to my husband. He's like, do not apologize, because I just felt like, oh my God, I'm letting our family down. Right.
Yeah.
And then a few months after that, so like to add insult to injury, a few months after that, I failed my written comps for my PhD program the first time I took them. And so then it became, okay, I lost my job and I failed my comps. Am I even in the right field? Am I even
Mhm.
doing the right thing? Is this even, you know, should I be doing something else? Right. And so
Yeah.
that's definitely followed me. And even still, when I got hired for my first true manager position with direct reports back in January, the whole first month I was like, my boss is going to realize I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. And he's going to be like, get out of here,
Uh-huh.
And then the longer you're there, the more you're like, I think I have a handle on this. I think I'm okay, but it never stops.
Yeah. Yeah, so when you're having sort of that moment of imposter syndrome or episode, whatever we want to call it, what does it feel like? Like, what are the thoughts that you have? What's it like to be Heidi when that's happening?
It's so wild because you treat yourself how you would never even treat your worst enemy. You're like, you are worthless. You can't do anything right. You're not smart enough. You're not good enough. You're never going to amount to anything. And it just like, it starts building.
Mhm.
Right. And the littlest things just make it that much worse. So like, for example, if you are starting to think those thoughts and you accidentally knock over a glass of water, something you could do on any day of your life, but because it's on this day, you're inept and you're a failure and you're stupid. And see, you knew it, right?
Mhm.
So it's kind of that, the self-talk that happens is really unfortunate because like I said, you would never treat another person that way.
Mhm. Most of us wouldn't.
Right. Oh, true.
I've met a few assholes that would, but for the most
Okay,
part,
fair.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, most of us wouldn't. So, was your most recent episode, was that your new job, or have you
Yeah.
had one since then? Or yeah.
No, I think it was really the new job the whole first month, just like waking up every morning and signing on to into the computer and being like, is today the day he's going to realize that he made the wrong choice hiring me? you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And has he come to you and said, "I've made the wrong choice hiring you"?
No,
No, that
I've
hasn't
gotten
happened.
nothing but very nice feedback
Oh,
and
good.
very
Look at that.
positive
Okay,
feedback.
good.
And that
Yeah,
that helps, right?
it
Like that
does.
helps too, is like, oh, he's happy with this. Oh, he's happy with this. So,
Yeah. How do you cope when this happens? So, like, when you start to feel that whole, he's gonna figure it out, like, I'm a fraud, like, this is dumb, stupid and dumb. Those are my favorite words to say is this is stupid and dumb. Like, and that's the only way that I can sort of mitigate my emotions. But like, what do you do to cope? Do you have techniques that you put into practice?
mhm.
Like, what makes it better?
One of the things that I think is super important is if there's like a situation like getting laid off that kind of springboards you into that, I think it's really important to like allow yourself some time to grieve. Like something terrible just happened to you, whether you feel it was in your control or not, you still have to allow yourself, like I'm really big on like allowing yourself time to feel your feelings, but also like respecting that fine line between like, I'm not going to spend 2 months in bed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I do at some point have to pick myself back up, but like, I think, so the day I found out I failed my comps, for example, I texted my boss and I was like, can I please have the rest of the day off? Cause I'm going to be worthless.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, of course. And so I think I took a nap. I think I turned on Netflix and like, or played a video game. I can't remember. Whatever it was to like get out of my world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Use a little bit of escapism there, you know, like take a bubble bath or eat a pint of ice cream, like whatever you need to do. Like, and that lasted like the first few days. And then I was finally like, okay, I think I'm ready to collect myself and email my professor and be like, okay, now what?
Uh-huh.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think it is important to kind of to do those things to cope. But the other thing that I really like to do to cope with all of it is I found that like volunteering and giving back helps tremendously for a number of reasons. So like I started working with a volunteer group that helps educators transition into instructional design.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing how I am in my imposter syndrome, it's helped me greatly. Like I lost my job in this field and then I was lucky enough to be able to find another. But what makes me feel even better is helping other people find jobs too, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that that volunteering, that giving back, it really does help because not only do you feel like you're making somewhat of a difference, but you start to realize that you actually do know what you're talking about. And at first it's hard because, you know, I experience imposter syndrome with that too, where people are like asking me for career advice. I'm like, who the heck am I to be telling you, you know, what to do in your career? Like I'm nobody.
Mm-hmm.
But then knowing that like, then when they ask specific questions, the fact that I have answers, I'm like, oh, wait, I do know about this, you know, and just watching people that you've helped actually get jobs and actually be successful really does a lot
Mm-hmm.
to help shut up that inner voice.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are great ways to cope. What would you say to somebody who is experiencing imposter syndrome right now?
Um, Definitely to feel your feelings, but also to like to be nice to yourself, right? Like be kind to yourself and realize I think what really kind of turned my mindset around once I got laid off was that I realized that I'm the only one who can really put limits on myself. And yeah, there are some outside things that can happen, but if I decide that I'm not going to keep looking for a new job, I'm the one that did that. If I
Mm-hmm.
decided to quit my PhD program after I failed my comps the first time, I did that to myself, you know?
Yeah.
And so realizing that, like, really, I'm the person that puts those limits on me. And if I don't limit myself and if I just keep going, then there's really not much that you can't do,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and you start to realize that and you start to find that out and it helps a lot.
Yeah. Agreed. So I have one more question for you.
Mhm.
And that is, why did you want to be part of this imposter syndrome project?
So that's hilarious because when I first saw the bat signal, as I like to
Yes.
call it,
Yes.
my initial thought was, I don't think I should email Betty because I don't think that I'm the kind of person that people want to hear from about this.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, duh, Heidi. That's exactly why you should email Betty because there it is right there, right?
Yep.
Like nobody wants to hear what I have to say. And I'm like, oh, ding, ding, ding.
Ding, ding, ding. Well, there
There
you
it
go.
is.
There you go. Well, I'm so glad that you did. And we so appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing your stories. So thanks so much, Heidi.
Yeah, thank you.
If you like this series and you want to show support, go to buymeacoffee.com/ifyouaskbetty to learn more about how you can support this and future If You Ask Betty projects.